Today, on the Basketball Manitoba podcast, we have Keith Omoerah. Keith is a graduate of Grant Park High School, where he finished his career second in the province. He's a former member of the Manitoba Provincial Team, playing for 2 summers. He went on to play at the University of Manitoba, where he was Canada West's second team All-Star, and helped the team return to the Nationals for the first time in over 30 years. In only 4 seasons with the Bisons, he finished his career 4th in total rebounds, 7th in field goals made, 6th in assists, 10th in blocks, 7th in steals, 5th in games started, and 4th in minutes played all time. After his 4th year, he decided to start his professional career, where he's played in Norway, Ukraine, France, Iran, Spain, and Sweden. He's represented the Nigerian National Team starting in 2017 up into 2021. Keith, welcome to the podcast.
Appreciate you having me, man. We've been trying to get it together for a while, so I'm happy we're finally here.
We have. No, it's good. You obviously were playing overseas, and there's a few people who we've been trying to get on. They're playing pro, and it's like I keep telling Adam's listening right now. I say, Adam, like just leave them alone, man. Like it's too crazy with the time, like the time difference, and like you're playing, and it's like it's too hard even for me to coordinate. So it's like off season. So we're actually our plan is to get every person who's played pro in this summer. We're going to try to get everybody. So
that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So man, I kind of want to start with, what we've kind of, I don't know, it seems like it's over now. I'm hoping it's over now, this pandemic. I don't know if it's ongoing forever, but you got to start playing pro before the pandemic, and then the pandemic happened and you continued to play pro. Yeah. So, I was just curious on a personal level, what are some of the biggest challenges that when you're playing professionally during the pandemic? You're in another country, you still have to compete and play basketball. There's all these limitations, sometimes in some places, depending on where you were, you couldn't even like go outside. So what were some of those biggest challenges for you personally?
For me, it was a large part of being overseas. For me is the experience of getting to travel and experience other countries. So obviously during the pandemic, like the rest of the world, a lot of these countries were shut down. So you couldn't go and explore. You couldn't really get the kind of vibrant city life that you would normally get. You wouldn't get the full experience from some of these cities. So that was kind of tough. On the other hand, it was just kind of like the NBA. We didn't have any fans. So for a lot of basketball players, they feed off the crowd, so their games would change. But for other players, the crowd kind of adds another element of pressure to them. So they were playing better without the crowds there, right? But for me, it was just kind of the life outside of basketball that was the difficult part, because it became a lot more challenging for people to come down and visit too. So 9-10 months overseas without seeing a single familiar face gets kind of tough.
And so then this last run here, where were you playing, and then had things changed quite a bit? Because you were playing like in the actual lockdown, nothing was happening, and then things started opening up a little bit. So what was it like when things started opening up? You must have been like, this feels great.
Yeah, you know what? Also, that's kind of the double-edged sword a little bit though, because you couldn't get people to come see you, right? A lot of things were closed down, but when things started slowly opening back up, I was in France at the time.
Okay.
So it wasn't busy tour season. So for me, it was my first time in France, staying in Paris, and I got to experience that without any kind of travelers or anything like visitors, anything like that, right? So I was in the Louvre. I was standing in front of Mona Lisa. I could have stood there for 3 hours and no one would have walked by.
For real?
Right? I walked in, walked right up, no line, no nothing. I just stood there. I could have stood there forever. Right. But you try to do that now, you're going to be waiting 2 hours in line just to get to the front. So it's so in that kind of aspect, it was cool because I was able to see things kind of more at a expedited process, if you will. Yeah. So this year, back to your question. So when I had left Canada last September, we were full on lockdown. And I went to Spain for the first 4 months from September to December. So it was kind of just like it was back home, mask mandates everywhere, you kind of, social distancing. But in December, I had left and I went to Sweden. So mind you, at this point, I'm kind of accustomed to the mask. We all kind of are. It's just kind of the way of life at the moment. But when I had to Sweden never had closed down. So when I had got off the plane, immediately there wasn't a mask in sight. And I was just kind of like, oh, like I guess like right now, specifically at the airport, they're like not really caring about the rules. And then the next day I woke up, I was put on my mask, I walked out the house. And yeah, I didn't see a mask anywhere. And I was just kind of like, oh, right. This is like what it's like kind of getting back to like normal living. I remember for the first little bit, I would leave the house and I'd forget like my mask or something like that. And I'd run back and go get it. But like no one out there was doing it because they were back to normal immediately. They actually didn't shut down like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a weird, but also a very refreshing adjustment going back to normal life out there.
Yeah. That was Sweden's always the country everyone uses of like, look at Sweden. They're not doing this. Well, so yeah, so you had mentioned like it seems like you are someone because I've interviewed people or talked to people who play pro and they actually don't really like the travel aspect of it or learning new cultures. They're just kind of like whatever. You seem someone you like you said you enjoy that part of it. So when the pandemic was happening, you obviously have way more time to like reflect or do different things. Do you have any shift in mindset or perspective during that time that you now have that is has changed you radically, or is it just more business as usual?
My mindset kind of during the whole time, my kind of shift was kind of exactly that, getting out and exploring more and seeing more of what the world has to offer. Because if anything showed it during this whole process, it kind of how fast things can be taken away, right? We couldn't leave the country, we couldn't go X, Y, Z, so on and so forth. But fortunately enough, I was able to be over there still. So getting out and getting to experience like all the different cultures and kind of at their purest form with just the locals, that for me was like a big shift. Like I need to kind of really dive into this a little bit and kind of get to experience it.
Nice.
When I was younger, it was just like go there, play basketball, sit at home on Netflix, and like just playing and hooping. But now for me, it's kind of like it's kind of a combination of both. Like there's places I would go back to, countries I would go back to, but I want to experience the world. And this is kind of like playing basketball professionally. The bonus is I also get to see the world kind of for free, if you will.
Yeah, no, I've definitely know exactly what you're talking about. I've experienced that personally, and it's I it's difficult, like you said, when you're younger, you don't really value those things. But I know some people even older that don't value those things. Like they just don't care. And it's fine, but that's like your existence is going to the hotel, going to play whatever basketball, then going back to the hotel. And for me, like that's like that's hard, man. Like that's like what are you doing? You look outside, like there's a whole world out there.
Exactly, man. Everybody's different. I get that, but like for me, I'm not like I've never have been a video game type of guy. But guys, one thing I understand why people bring it overseas and spend so much time with it, right? Because it's one communication of back home, right? It's a lot of communication to play with your friends and your family and all that, and I get that completely. But it's never been me. So for those guys, they're like, well, what do you do if you don't play video games? Anything else? Anything else you would do back home, I can do that here, right? I can read a book, watch a movie, go explore, right? So I'm happy for me. I don't have that. Because it's kind of one less tie to staying inside.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, so I've been asking people about the pandemic, but again, we want to talk about you. Like to start at the beginning. So I want to kind of start the beginning with your story, but first I want to start with the beginning of my story in knowing you. So it's super interesting because you probably don't know this, but my first memory of you was back when I was coaching college or high school, whatever. I was coaching often and went to go watch Grant Park play at Grant Park. I have no idea who you guys were playing. I couldn't even tell you why I was there. But the one thing I do remember is seeing you play for the first time. And you're like, you weren't as tall as you are now, but you're tall for like high school. I think you were probably like 6'1", 6'2" at the time. And this is grade 11. You're silky smooth. You're taking these tough like pull up jump shots and like in people's faces, and you're making them though, right? Rebounding, attacking the basket. You're like pretty much playing the point. You're just doing all the stuff that you obviously continue to do. But that was the first time I saw you, and I've been a fan of your game like ever since, right? Like, and it's weird to say that, but high school, you probably know this as an adult now. High school coaches, they talk about kids all the time, and it's kind of weird, but they're talking about their game, right? Like, have you seen, hey, that Keith guy? Oh, and they debate it, right? And so always been a fan of your game. But I say all that just to say, well, what are some of your first memories of basketball? How'd you get involved with the game? Who introduced you
Ooh,
to it? Where did you play?
yeah, okay. My first kind of memories of basketball, I was in elementary, Carpathia Elementary School. We had these like low, like 6 foot nets. Went there from nursery to grade six, and that was kind of like just playing at recess with my friends.
Hmm.
Just wanting to touch the rim the whole entire time I was there. Finally, like grade five, being able to do it. Mind you, it's like a 6 foot rim, like I said. But playing there was kind of like what sparked basketball for me. And then the first kind of team I played on was the downtown YMCA, playing for them, right? And that's back when I don't know if they still do it now, but like the downtown Y would play against like the South Y and like
Yeah.
so on and so forth, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of my first team setting of basketball. And for me, it was just kind of like, me and my family, we didn't grow up with like the most means, right? We were Manitoba housing. So for me, basketball was one of those games where it's like all you needed was it wasn't expensive. Hockey's a
Yeah.
very expensive sport to play.
Yeah.
Basketball is you just need a ball, go find a rim, right?
Hmm.
So that for me, that's what it was. And it was like simple. So I kind of just fell in love with it, just got rolled the basketball, and I would just be outside for hours playing and playing. That's kind
Nice.
of where the love for the game started.
Nice. Nice. And so did you play like, was it just like kids from the neighborhood, people you went
Yeah,
to
for
school with?
sure. There was just like a gang of us, like as we had out my back window was kind of like the community field, and if you would look outside, if you didn't see people there playing soccer, you knew they were playing basketball. So you'd either walk out and play soccer, or if they weren't there, you'd go walk out to the basketball court, and I would just play with guys in my community for hours and hours on end.
Nice, nice. Do you remember when you started to take it seriously? Like, was it in high school? Was it
Um,
like when you're
I think,
like, this is a serious thing for me? Not like I'm like, because you probably started to realize you're good, right? Like, okay, I think I'm
yeah,
good.
yeah.
But do you remember that moment? You're like, no, no, this is what I do.
I think like I think back then it was like districts. We were playing districts, not like club ball.
Yeah.
I played for districts. I played for Alex Barra on Mayhem,
Hmm.
and that's when I was like, okay, like I really like this. Like I feel I'm really good, but I don't think people reciprocated that yet.
Oh, okay.
No, this is back when what was it? Hoop Life. You remember Hoop Life,
Oh, of
the
course.
online
Of
forum? Yeah,
course.
I remember being on Hoop Life, and like other basketball players our age would be like ranking each other, and I would never be in those conversations. And I'd be like, damn, man, like what do I got to do? I feel I'm better than these guys. So I remember just like being on that site. Oh, that's hilarious. I completely forgot about that.
Hoop Life.
Hoop
Shout out to
Life.
Hoop
Like,
Life.
oh my goodness.
You know they
Um,
had to take that down because it was so like people were just starting to go at each other and
Oh,
it
it was
just got,
toxic,
it
man.
was
It
very
was
yeah.
toxic, right? But all you were hoping is you would see your name on one of these lists that some random guy wrote or some
Yeah.
random girl, and just
Yeah.
be like, "Oh yes, I feel validated now."
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
man. What a funny time. What a
I,
fucking story.
I
I
forgot about Hoop
completely
Life.
forgot about that till right now. That's
Oh.
hilarious. But I think it was my grade nine year or grade. I was always serious about basketball, but I think it was my grade nine year. I had some like growing pains. I had the Osgood slaughters like through the roof. So I couldn't really be what I wanted to be because I was trying to grow into my body, which was very, very painful at the time. But I knew I wanted to take it very seriously. So for me, I think the grade nine year was where I was like, I'm going to do this. This is
Hmm.
something I'm going to do for like long term.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So along the line of our life, we meet a lot of different coaches, mentors. So who were some of those early ones for you? Like, did they exist in junior high, or was it not till you got to
Yeah.
high school?
So for me, what really kind of sparked the ambition to kind of be the best that I possibly could was my teacher and coach at Grand Park, Russ LeMay.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
he was the one who kind of planted the seed. And, prior to that, Alex Barr kind of instilled hard work. This is like back when we were younger and, we were really busting our butts on the court. There was no
Hmm.
kind of quit. It was like hard nosed kind of basketball. There was no letting, being soft, if you will, kind of.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so that was kind of my first introduction to it. But then LeMay kind of took that to another level. So once I started playing under him, it was since my grade 9 year. He was like mentor to me. He was kind of like a second father. He was like a father figure to me, like a second father. He just really looked out for me and the guys on the team. We really still have a very good connection. So since then, coaching under him, he was like my first and earliest role model. And that's what really kind of got me going on the path that I am today.
Yeah, shout out to Russ.
Shout out to Russ.
Man. Yeah, just
Absolutely.
I remember Russ would always crack jokes because he'd be like sore or he'd be like kind of sore and I remember playing and like I'll be warming up and he'd just he'd just like clowning me for it and stuff like that. But I was there when he popped his Achilles.
Oh,
so I remember he ruptured his Achilles. I was there, I saw it happen, and I don't know if I clowned him after. I'm like, this is why we warming up, man. Come on. But yeah, no, Russ is a good dude, man. Russ is a good guy.
He was. He's a great guy. Yeah, it was. Yeah. I remember, and he didn't have no problem like telling me like it was right. Like I said, this was when I was the time period of my Auschwitz slaughter. So I think I grew 6 to 8 inches in one summer. So when I came back, I was like Bambi, man. I had no control of my limbs. I had nothing. I was so weak. And so he would get guys to go at me in practice, and he would verbally like tell me all the time, like, you're the worst defender on this team. He would let me know. He wouldn't hold back. Not in like a demeaning way, but he was this is the reality of the situation right now. You want to be here right now. You're here. You had his little like one-liners, like paint him orange and call him a pylon, and all of that. So yeah, he kept it real with me. He pushed me though. Shout out to him to being a huge part of my journey for sure.
Yeah. No, that's too funny. That's too good. And so like obviously you went on to play at U of M. Now there's an interesting thing, and I kind of want you to break it down here because you went on to play at U of M. However, in between you took some time off. You were actually slumming it with me and the rest of us in the senior men's league. No offense to anyone out there who doesn't think it was slumming, but hey, let's be honest. Like a guy of your talent level, like that young, like one thing if you're older, fine, like play senior men's, you're done playing, right? But you still had years left, and I always remember like we'd battle. We had some really good battles and stuff like that, our teams, but it was always like, yo, is Keith going to play somewhere? Is Keith going to play? And it was always this thing like, not only did we want you to leave because your teams are good and you're challenging us, but we're like, yo, like this guy's got to play somewhere, right? And so it was, I just remembered like that was like a constant theme. And when you went back to U of M, I was super excited because at that time, like Kirby was starting to build stuff. Right? He had just got hired not too long ago, and he was, like it took a little while, but then when you went back, like you guys had like a special squad. And I mentioned in your bio in the intro there just about how you guys went to nationals, and so I just kind of wanted to just talk about that year a little bit. Like, what do you remember about that year? The guys, what made it special? I don't know, man. What are the first kind of thoughts that come to mind when I just bring up that year specifically?
Yeah, well, going back to the beginning of it, it was kind of an interesting. The whole how U of M kind of played out. Looking back at it now, it happened exactly as it should have. But when I was coming out of high school, it really came down to me between McMaster and Manitoba.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember they came to an arrangement being that Manitoba would go to McMaster for a preseason, and McMaster would come to the Duckworth Challenge at the time. So they were making it work for me from both kind of parties, right? But for me, growing up, a young kid in Winnipeg, I was like, I just want to get out of here. I want to leave, blah, 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 blah. Winnipeg sucks, all this jazz, right? So I originally had committed to McMaster. I don't know if it's changed now, but also in Canada, you can verbal commit, you don't have to sign.
Yeah.
So right after I graduated, I think it was 3 days later, maybe I was on a plane to Mac, and I was out there for the summer. Supposed to be out there for the summer. And Ogo, he also coached me in high school with Russ. So he went on to assistant coach at the U of M for a bit. And as I'm on the plane going to Mac, I get a text from him, and he's like, call me. And I call him quick. I'm on the airplane. Did you hear? And I was like, hear what? He's like, McMaster just fired the coach. And I was like, The
Wow.
one who came down to recruit me, like Victor Razzo, he's like, or Joe Razzo, sorry. He's like, yeah, they fired him. And I was like, well, I have to go. Plane's taking off. Hang up. So I fly out there, and this is on my mind the whole time, and I'm landing, and some of the teammates pick me up, and they're kind of, just space filler conversation, and I'm like, kind of like, okay, is someone going to address the elephant in the room? Because I've heard about this, and I've heard about it from the other side, not from here. And they're like, oh yeah, I kind of explained that whole situation. So the new coach came in, and I was there for a month and a half, I think, and it just wasn't the same. I committed to the coach. I committed to the coach and the program and what he brought with it. And when he kind of left, if you will, kind of got shown the door a little bit. What he brought to the table also left with him, right? Because people were also committed to him, because sort of sponsors and whatnot. So I was out there, and I was there, and I kind of realized, I didn't want to be away from home anymore, and also it wasn't the right fit for me anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So choosing between the U of and U of M wasn't like, let me decide between a coach. Both coaches were great. They are great. It was also kind of, I wanted a life experience. I wanted to go travel a little bit.
Yeah.
So, I've been in Manitoba my whole life. So while I was out there, I said, you know what, this isn't for me. I wanted to come back home. So talk to Kirby, and he said, we still have a spot if you want to come back. Talked to Ogo, and he was just like, well, we told you in the first place you should have stayed here.
Ogo would say that.
Ogo kept it real. He's like, well, yeah, maybe we don't want you now. Let me come home. So yeah, it ended up working out. I came back, played here for 2 years, played at the University of Manitoba for 2 years. And I just fell out of love with basketball. I was just kind of, I don't know what it was, if I wasn't ready for the adjustments, or if I was in kind of a different headspace, but I wasn't ready for the full-on commitment that it needed. And I left. So after 2 years, Kirby and I had a little talk about it. I left basketball, left U of M, was just working for a bit. And that's in that space is when we were playing, right?
Yeah, well, you were slumming it up. You were slumming it with us.
And that I always knew I was going to go back.
Okay.
But everybody, for me, it wasn't a question of like if, right? It was just kind of when. I had some growing up to do that needed to happen outside of basketball. And honestly, those best years was the best thing for me. Leaving and maturing and growing up on my own terms was the best thing for me. And when I was ready, I messaged Kirby, and he was like, we're ready if you're back and you're serious. And I'm like, I am. It's time. I'm ready. And he was already building something very special. Thankfully, I got to walk into that. And I was just kind of, I was just a great piece to the puzzle. And that first year, I think we lost. We ended up going to, went to the Final Four. And I think we lost in the third place game. So we just missed qualifying for nationals. But we had essentially everybody coming back the next year. So our goals were kind of banner or bust, right? Nationals or bust. So that's where the expectation was from the beginning. Funny enough, we started worse than we did the previous year. We started that year worse than the previous year, but that didn't change anything for us. We knew how good we were and what we were capable of doing. And we just had to kind of stay the course. So that whole year was going by. You know what? We got in the playoffs, not in a good seed for some people. We were going to go play UBC at UBC, and UBC had only lost one game that year on the road. They didn't lose one single game at home. For us, we loved that matchup. We had no worries about it. We fully believed in ourselves that we were winning everything this year. So we went out to BC, best of 3 series. Take the first game in overtime, I think. Huge, like the whole Canada West being like, what a upset. This was never supposed to happen. BC will bounce back, so on. So we heard it all, right? Heard all that nonsense. Play the second night, goes into another very close game. We had some guys step up huge for us, monstrous for us, right? First night, AJ hits a game winner. Second night,
that was that. Yeah.
That was huge. I think second night, Alarion, I think he put up like almost 30 for us. He was just a monster. We just had the right group of guys, and we ended up sweeping them on their court to
So
book our
crazy.
ticket to the Final Four. No one expected it, right? Nobody gave us a ounce of hope to win that series. And it was just like, it was kind of, it felt like it was already written. We were supposed to be there. And we
Hmm.
went to the finals, the Final Four, won that game, got into the finals against Alberta in Calgary. Unfortunately, lost pretty bad, but it was kind of like the silver lining in that is that making the finals put us into nationals. So we had already made nationals. Didn't get the banner we wanted from Can West, but it was like, okay, reshift the focus because now we're going to nationals. And like you said at the beginning, first time in 30 years. So that was huge for the program, huge to be a part of that as well. And, we felt the support. We felt that support all year from everybody back home, from the alumni, from the community. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing. So went on to nationals. Didn't perform like we needed to, unfortunately. Lost the first one. And after that, it was just kind of like, for us, it was just kind of over because now we were on the, B side of the bracket, which didn't really mean it, which was an accomplishment still, but didn't mean anything for us because we had higher aspirations at the time. But, hindsight, bigger picture, phenomenal what we were able to accomplish that year as a program, as, a group individually as well. And for the U of M, right? It's not everybody gets to go to nationals year in and year out. There's a lot of teams that haven't been for a long time. So be able to do that for Manitoba, for the school, for the city. It was a big deal. And it was, I'll never forget that run we had. It was amazing. I think like the last month, this was kind of like prepping us for pro. The last month of that season, I think we were on the road like 20 out of the 30 days or something like that. So it was a really, really cool experience too. But came up short, but it was an unbelievable experience.
Yeah, and I remember that because, like, obviously, like you said, everyone was supporting you. Like, I mean, we know this, and people who are listening know this. Manitoba was a small community, and the basketball community is even smaller. So, whenever we see this type of success outside, people support. People are happy for this type of stuff, right? And I remember following. Obviously, I am an alumni as well, right? And I remember just like following so closely, just being like so fired up and like just and the squad was just such a cool group of guys. Like it was made up, again, there were some people from outside of Manitoba, tons of Manitobans, right? Like key players who were Manitobans, which was special as well.
Absolutely.
It was great. And then like obviously like Kirby leading the charge. I want to ask you about about Kirby. Like obviously he was your coach for 4 years. I don't even really have a question. Like I interviewed him, and obviously Kirby's a great interview, right? Like he's just like a guy. You could just tell us some stories, Kirby. Talk about this, and he'll just do it, right? So it was like the easiest thing I've ever done. I was just intrigued the whole time. But if you had to say there was one thing that stood out to you about Kirby as a coach that sticks with you to this day, right? Like you're playing on all these teams, you have all these coaches. You hope that some of these things stick with us, right? Especially the best practices. So what are maybe one or two of the things that are always with you, where his voice is in your head?
I think just this is a little separate from what you're saying, but the biggest thing one of the best things about playing for Kirby, besides him being a great X's and O's coach and him knowing his stuff completely, is that he lives and breathes the game and he understands it at such a high level. Obviously he's coached at Team Canada as well. So Kirby, like the systems he's been putting in play for us was stuff we weren't really seeing at that level because he has so much international experience. So playing for Kirby was kind of like pro prep, if you will, right? It was kind of like he was getting us already developed for the pro game. That other coaches weren't doing because he has that international experience. So playing for him, it was like we always joke about it that year was just kind of like our first year pro. We had 4 guys from that year alone go professional. So playing under him and having that experience and having his knowledge, just being able to be a sponge for him, it's just been such a privilege. His X's and O's are kind of next to none. He's always seems like he's ahead of the curve, which has been a blessing because I still get to come back and go to the U of M and pick his brain all the time. So it's phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I appreciate about Kirby so much is he has the knowledge, but he has the ability to teach it. Like he makes it very simple for you, right? It's
Yeah,
like, oh, like I
absolutely.
totally get it. Like, and whereas I know a lot of people who have the knowledge, but it's hard to convey it to other people, right? And
Mhm.
he's
Mhm.
he's he's very, very good at that. I would say he's an expert at in that regard specifically. So,
Yeah, and he has the
um,
answers, right? Like he kind of lets you kind of come to the conclusions yourself a little bit. But like, this is what we're doing, and then he already knows the next three steps. But he's like, "This is what we're doing," and the guys are like, "Well, why would we do that if we don't do X, Y, Z?" And he's like, "Thank you. You're doing
yes,
this because, right?" He's like leading you to the water, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
it's great. He knows his stuff. It's phenomenal.
yeah,
And the
yeah.
thing about Kirby too, like he's a human. He's not afraid to make mistakes,
Hmm.
right? He's not one of those coaches where you can talk to him, and he's not one of those coaches where if you as a player see something and you bring it to him and it turns out that's actually better, he's not too big to not implement that or to make that change.
Mm.
Oh, ref, I see that. This is better for the team. Okay, we'll do this. We'll do this instead of that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Shout out to Kirby. Shout out to
Yeah,
Kirby.
absolutely. No,
If
absolutely.
if whoever's listening to this right now, if you haven't listened to Kirby's or watched Kirby's, go back and watch it. It's one of the earlier episodes. It was I
Yeah,
enjoyed
he's
it.
great.
I enjoyed it a lot.
He's
So,
fantastic.
okay, so you finished playing. You only played 4 years. Two questions.
Yeah.
One, did you think about playing a fifth year?
No, not at all.
You
I
knew
knew I
you're
was
like, I'm good. I'm good.
yeah. Coming
Okay.
into that last year, Kirby and I discussed. I was like, after this, kind of, I'm gone. I'm turning pro.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then so talk about that process. Like what was it like? Like you obviously found an agent. They just said, "Hey, here are some teams." Did you have to try out? Like what? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I wish I was able to find an agent. No, that's not how it went at all.
All right, let's hear it. What happened?
So even now, 2022 compared to 2017, it's night and day for Canada basketball. Right now, the
Mm,
light is kind of being shined on Canada basketball with how good it is out here and how much quality players we have.
mm-hmm.
Um, so the tide is turning a little bit, but overseas, all these coaches and these clubs still think like if you have a Division 1 tag next to your name,
Yeah,
they see it as the holy grail, which
yeah.
like overseas means nothing, to be fair. Well, I've come across players from big blue schools, from the best schools in the states. They know that haven't kind of lived up to the hype, but then you
Mm-hmm.
got guys coming from like CIS or from Division 3 who are just want it more. And then once they're on
Mm-hmm.
that platform, it really shows. They
Mm-hmm.
don't like you get removed from the comforts of your environment. You get placed overseas, and it really comes out. Like, are you really about it, or are you not?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that that the whole Division 1 tag thing kind of doesn't matter. Basketball is one of those sports where if you're good enough, you will get recognized,
Mm.
right? It's harder in football if you're a great receiver, but you got a terrible quarterback. Well, you might not get noticed, right?
Yeah.
If you're good in
True.
basketball and you're really good, somebody's gonna see you.
True,
So
true.
for me, my first year coming out, I was trying to contact these agents, and like I said, Canada at the time wasn't like as highly respected. So I was trying to contact these agents, and they're kind of just like, no, this, that, or whatever. So I must have sent out legitimately like thousands of emails to agents, coaches, clubs, all the above. Like
Really?
me and Larry joke about this all the time because there was no one really, really before us that we were like too close at the time that kind of could show us the ropes. We were kind of just doing it on our own, and we had each other. So we were just kind of like doing it on our own, sending out these emails. Everyone from that class I graduated with, AJ, John, we all went pro, doing that process together. So I think it came, September like 8th. I get a Facebook message from a coach in Norway. He is Eckhoff. I get a message from him, and he's like, "Do you want to come play in Norway?" And I was like, "This is my first offer that's come since I finished playing college. Yes, I do." So like over Facebook Messenger, like agreeing that I wanted to come
No,
play.
no.
And he's
You
like,
didn't, hold on,
"Okay,
hold
well,
on. You
just
didn't even
one
talk
time."
to the guy? This is like you're like texting him.
We're
You're
like,
like,
yeah,
hey,
we're like messaging like on the computer,
yeah,
like
yeah,
Facebook
yeah.
Messenger. And he's just like, "Do you want to come play? These will be the details, X, Y, Z." And I'm like, "Yes." So we get on the phone, we chop it up a little bit on the phone, iron out the details. He signs over the contract. And I think, yeah, he sent it like on the 8th. And I think I was gone like the 10th or the 11th or something like that.
Wow,
Straight to overseas.
wow, wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And then so once you played there, the following year, Was it again like, okay, I gotta like, were you still grinding again? Like when did you, I guess the question is when did you really start to get like, okay, this guy can play and people actually want you to play on their team?
Yeah, this wasn't I haven't really shared this like outside of my kind of circle. Um, so for me, I didn't have an agent my first year and I was new to the whole kind of experience. Um, so longest story short, when I went out there, the team lawyer was like, okay, we take care of this, we take care of that, the housing card, blah, 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 blah. We take care of all the visa paperwork, no, nothing. You just got to show up and sign the documents. And I'm like, for me, like I said, I didn't really have no one before me go that I could kind of check with and be like, hey, is this how it goes? And I didn't have an agent to kind of walk me through that process. So I was just like, okay, like kind of taking it at their face value. So I got there, was playing, everything was all good. And like I said, longest story short, I didn't know this at the time, but it turns out they told me they had all my visa and my paperwork and everything was, kosher. So I just kind of took their word for it. And then one day, March now, I find out that I had overstayed my time in Europe because they had been lying to me that I had my visa, and I actually didn't have my visa. So if you don't, you can as a visitor, you can only be there for 3 months, right? So 90 days without a visa. Yeah. So they told me I had that because I had went to do the paperwork, but there was a mistake on it from the club's end. They never fixed that and didn't let me know. So it was one day in March, I got a letter at my door and it said like the Norwegian immigrations or something. And so I take my phone, take a picture, Google Translate it to English, and they're like, you've overstayed your welcome. You have to leave the country tomorrow. And I was like,
what?
Hold on, wait a minute now. So I ended up driving to the lawyer's house that night, and she's like, yeah, we've actually have known about this. And I was like, well, this is about me, kind of my life. You should have been telling me about this, like, especially if you have known since December, right? This is something like I need to know about because this is my life. So she's like, we're trying to talk to them and work it out. And I was just kind of like, what the heck is going on? So turns out I actually had to leave the country. So it didn't get fixed. I had the next day I had to go down, show my proof of a flight. And the day after that, I was on a flight back home to Canada. But I had finished that year really well. Statistically, I did, first person in Norway to be top 10 in every category. Did really well, XYZ. So I had all the offers coming that year from agents and clubs, but because I had been in Norway for longer than my visa allowed me to, unfortunately, what ended up happening, kind of no fault to my own, or my fault, if you will, because I didn't know the process. I had gotten banned from the European Union for 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn.
So, I rebutted it. I came home, hired a lawyer, got all the paperwork, got all the text messages, all the details that I needed to make my case to the Norwegian immigrations and be like, look, like, if you will, I'm kind of the victim in this. Like, I know it's me that should know better because it's my person, but I didn't know all this, and they have all the power of attorney. They have all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. And they were the one taking care of the visa. It says right here in the paperwork, everything I signed over to them. And we rebutted this 3 times during the summer because the first one they said no to, then we mixed it up, did it again. And the third time we did it. And the third time I was like, okay, I have everything laid out for them. Like, I have all the facts. Like, there's absolutely no way they're going to overturn this. Impossible. We sent it to them. It seemed like they didn't even care to read it because they just sent an email back and they're like, we made our decision. You can't rebuttal this anymore. This is final. So for me, that was like, yeah, it crushed me because it took me so long to get on to, all these emails. And I finally went and I did everything that I was supposed to as a basketball player, finally got recognized by agents and coaches and was going to step into a really good opportunity, a really good contract. But I couldn't go to the European Union. So I couldn't go to Germany, Spain, France, which was where I was getting all these really good offers from. So that kind of like wouldn't derail me a little bit, but kind of deflated my tires, because
Yeah.
now I couldn't, like, all the places you want to play in Europe, I couldn't go. So I was, I was sat there, I was like, damn, like, is this what it's like? Do I really want to do this? And when I first got out to Norway, my first week there, I remember, I got out there and I landed, and my luggage didn't show up until 2 weeks later. So I had, like, two pair of boxers I was like washing by hand and recycling, like, like two pairs of socks I was washing by hand, and I'm kind of like, is this the pro life? Do I really want to do this? Is this what it's all about? Yeah, so I came home that summer and it was tough for me. I was really down on my luck. I didn't know if I wanted to do this. It was tough. I didn't know if I wanted to continue. But I was like, I got to give this a go. I've got to kind of see this through. I can't let someone else write my story and kind of end this journey for me. So I hired an agent and then had to go to Eastern Europe. So I went there for a year, and then I went to the Middle East for a year. And now it's all kind of ended. So I've been back in Europe playing again, in Western Europe playing, and it's just kind of like monkey off the back a little bit,
Wow, that's crazy. I never heard that story. That's wild,
Yeah,
man.
I've never told it outside of people who were like, I was really like my family and my best friend.
Yeah. That's crazy, man. That's like, it was a 2-year ban, but then after
2 years
that
now.
it just expired like naturally, or do you have to like
Yeah, no, after
reapply
that it just kind of all washed itself away. So I remember I was playing with the national team and we had a layover in Paris, and I was just kind of like, it's over now, but can I get in? Like,
Yeah.
can I just like walk in and go like explore for 15 hours? So some of my teammates were going, and I was just kind of like, well, here goes nothing, because if not, they're not going to let me in because I have a ban, right?
Yeah.
So we all went, and then like I go last, and I'm like handing them my passport, and stamp it, let me in, all good. And I didn't even notice it, but as soon as they stamped it and they let me in, there was just like this huge relief off my shoulder. There was just weight I was carrying that I didn't even know was there, like the kind of monkey off the back. And so all these guys, they were just going exploring Paris, and it was nothing for me. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm finally back. I'm finally here again. So yeah, it was a crazy ride my first year. I wish I was able to get an agent, and I also wish I had known better. I wish I could have talked to more people. Hindsight always kind of 2020, but also like, I don't take everything. There's positives in everything. I could have made that a terrible situation and stop playing basketball, or take the silver lining and take it for what it was. So for me, the silver lining in going to Norway, I had gotten banned from Europe for 2 years, but also my coach of my team in Norway was also at the time the previous coach of the Nigerian National Basketball Team. And he was
this is the connection.
This is the connection. And he was the one being like, well, why aren't you playing for the national team? And I was just kind of like, I don't know. I never really thought about it. So then that summer, he put me in contact with everyone that I should have. And I've been on the national team since that summer because of him. So it's kind of like, take the good with the bad a little bit, So if I didn't go there, I don't know if I would be playing for the national team. Right. Wow. But if I didn't go there, I wouldn't have also gotten banned for the 2 years. So, like, silver lining is that I'm playing for the national team, and it's taking me back home to Africa for the first time in my life. So, kind of, it's a weird kind of dynamic there for sure.
For sure. That's such a crazy story. Like like, that's wild, man. Because like you said, like, you probably wouldn't have been having those years of playing with the Nigerian national team had you not gone there. Like, it probably wouldn't have happened, or maybe it would have, but maybe way later, or like whatever. That's just crazy. And I mean, life, what would that be, like, serendipitous? I don't know if that's the right word, but life is crazy, man. Like, when these types of things,
absolutely.
Whenever you can sit back and look backwards, you're like, man, that's actually kind of crazy.
Yeah, so, it's wild how it happened.
Well, I mean, again, you answered my next question, because I was gonna like, well, how do you even get on the team? But I mean, I saw you. I don't know if it was an interview you did or a social media post. I don't know. All this stuff is just kind of like, it goes in your head. You don't know where it came from, but you did express some of your gratitude and even some emotion with reconnecting with that part of your culture and representing a national team and even some of your teammates. So I don't know. You kind of started talking a little bit about that.
Yeah.
You know the post I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking
Yeah.
about. So yeah, so for me, like I said, that connection with Norway was just kind of, it's wild. I don't even know how to sum it up. It's just, it's wild. It kind of is what it is. It's a beautiful disaster kind of, right?
There you go.
So, but within that connection, so at the time I was going to play now, I was 20, I was trying out for the national team in Nigeria. This was my first time. Obviously, my dad is Nigerian, my mom is Canadian. So this is my first time going to Nigeria at 26, and I'm going for a basketball tryout. First time ever going home. This is going to be the first time possibly meeting anyone on my dad's side of the family, right? So, of course, my dad, we talked to the family back home, and they're like, he's going to be down there trying for the national team. And they're like, okay, we're going to drive up from the village to come see him. And for me, I'm like, Dad, I really want to lock in and try to make this team. Like, I don't know if they should come to the airport because I don't know what's going to happen. I've never been to Africa. I don't know what's going to happen when I land. I don't know if they're going to take us off right away. Like, I just don't know. And I just want to focus. I really want to see them, but like, I really, really want to make this team. So like, please let me just like lock in a little bit here. So he tells them, and they're kind of like, we don't care. Like, we don't care. And I'm just kind of, I don't know if they come to the airport. I don't know if I'll be able to see you guys. So go to Africa, 26, haven't met anyone on my dad's side of the family. Go to Africa, we land in Nigeria, get off the plane. There's this whole show put on for us. We're outside now. There's a bunch of fans that are there. There's music playing, there's performers. We're walking down the line, shaking hands. Shaking hands with people, and then I go and I'm going. The next thing I know, it's my uncle standing there that I've never met before in my life. And he drove up 12 hours from our village for the opportunity to meet me at the airport.
Wow.
Right. And I'm just kind of like, oh my gosh, like he just drove 12 hours down here for the opportunity to maybe be able to meet me, right? Like his brother's son for the first time ever. And I just looked at him and I was just like, I was in shock, like I for sure, like, that shed a tear or two, right? I was
yeah.
Oh my gosh, we got to talk for like 20 minutes. Then I had to leave and he took off 12 hours back home.
Wow.
Just to talk for 20 minutes. And for me, immediately I was like, this is way bigger than basketball. I have basketball to thank for bringing me here, but being back in Nigeria, this trip is everything to me. So now there's not an option. Like, I'm making this team no matter what, like it has to happen. There's no other way it could go down. So thankfully I do. So I'm out there for 2 weeks. Then at the end of it, we end up playing games the last weekend while we're there. So a couple of my uncles and my cousins come up, and they're now, I'm meeting them there now at the hotel. I get to hang out with them, spend some actual time with them. And they're so excited because now our last name, the Omoerah last name, is now in the newspaper back in our village. So now our family's name is part of the village, right? Everybody's kind of talking about the Omoerahs, this and that. Right? So they get to come to the games, which is a phenomenal moment. So we get to spend some actual time together. I leave them with some of our gear that says like Omoerah on the back of it, and they're just like over the moon. And I remember, we were just on the shops, like on the street. And I remember I was FaceTiming my dad because I was like, hey, I want to grab you some stuff. What would you like? And I'm FaceTiming him, and my dad is just, we're just talking. And I'm like, okay, like, all right, I'm going to hang up. Just, just naive, whatever you want to call it, just a normal FaceTime for him and I, like, can do that any day of the week type of thing. Meanwhile, his brother is standing right there, and they haven't seen each other face to face interaction in like 20 years. So I'm just like getting ready to hang up the phone, like so nonchalant about it. And he's like, hey, do you mind if I talk to dad real quick? And I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, like, like you
Wow.
haven't seen him in 20 years. And the ignorance of me just to be like, yeah,
Yeah.
dad, okay, I'll talk to you later, like no problem, like whatever, right? And I just like, oh my, like what was I thinking? And
Yeah.
I just stand back and I watch them like have that interaction and they're talking face to face for the first time in forever. And I'm just like, this is bigger than life, man. This is way bigger than me, way bigger than basketball. So for me, that trip was absolutely everything to me. I mean, the best basketball trip I've been on in my life, the best trip I've been on in my life, period. And being back home, being back in Nigeria, like getting to find out more of who I am as a man, right, and more of who my family is. Yeah, that to me is absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely everything.
Damn. That's
Yeah.
crazy, man. That's hey, I was getting like when you're talking about with your uncle there, I was like getting like teared up, man. I was getting emotional. I was just like,
No,
geez, man, like that's like overwhelming. Like I can just
100%.
sense how that like how overwhelming that would be. And then what so have you been back, I guess is the question since then?
So I haven't been back since 2018. No. So I was hoping. So there's another basketball window coming up in August, and I was hoping it was going to be in Nigeria, and then me and my dad would go back together for the first time,
Mm,
and that would have been, that's the for me that's the ceiling, right?
hmm.
Like going back to Nigeria with my dad. Once I do that, like I'm good. That trip is everything for me and for us, for our family.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I was hoping it was going to be there, but it's not. It's going to be in the Ivory Coast. So I think, next summer the plan is in the works, whether we're going back there for basketball or not. We're just going.
You're going.
So next summer is when I'm going to go spend some real time down there with me and my dad. Uh,
Nice.
yeah, and that's like that's the that's the peak, man. That's Mount Everest for me. That has to
Uh,
happen.
I love it. I love it. So it's so funny because my next question was gonna be, so what's your most memorable basketball story? But I feel like that was it. I don't
That's it.
know.
Yeah, by far.
Yeah,
By
that's
far.
a
Yeah.
uh,
Nothing else tops it. Like
oh
that's
man.
that's really that's really everything for me. That's
That's
it.
what's up. I love it, man. I love hearing that stuff. Like I said, like I said, I was getting emotional for a minute there, man. I was like, man, like, but I think it's such an interesting thing because, I think so many people who've played ball and have gotten to travel, or even think about when you were young, like you just traveled around Canada and you're like, yo, this is crazy. Like, what's going on? Like,
Absolutely.
and so that's the one thing I love about basketball, and it's probably said about every sport, but we're basketball players. Is like it shows you a world that you would have never known. You meet people you would have never known. It
100%.
completely changes your experience of your life. Like,
Hundred
you know,
percent. Yeah. I mean, as you know, we got the game to be so thankful for, it showing us different parts of the world, right?
hmm
I know for sure, that I wouldn't have gone to half of the places that I've gone if it
hmm
wasn't for basketball.
yeah,
Like, basketball's taking me back to Nigeria now, to Angola, to Ivory Coast, to Rwanda, I've been to China, the Middle, like Iran, the Middle
yeah.
East, all over Europe. It's because of this damn orange basketball that's brought me to these places. Thankfully, I
Yeah,
have basketball to thank for taking me to all these beautiful places and helping me make all these beautiful connections. So it's definitely a tool. It's one
100%.
line Kirby Chef has always said, yeah, here you go, coming for full circle. One line he's always said, it's always stuck with me is use the game of basketball. Don't let the game of basketball use you.
Well
Right. And
said.
it's always stuck with me.
Well said. Well said. It's interesting because my next question was gonna be like I was gonna like, hey, we got to wrap this up, man. Like I feel like we could just keep chopping it up and talk because I mean you're a very good storyteller,
No,
um, and you have interesting stories, which helps a lot. But typically I like say, okay, we're coming to the end of the interview, and I ask some
mhm.
questions, but I don't even have to ask. Those questions don't have to be asked because you just answer them in so many ways. But the last thing which again, you can just say this was it. You can be like, no, that was the advice. Is I usually ask people to pass on some advice. So if they're a coach, talk to young coaches, right? In your case, it would be like talk to young players, talk to those players in college or even players in high school that
Mhm.
want to play professionally. So the question exactly is, what advice would you give them if you had a bunch of people from Manitoba and you're giving a speech, right? We have Keith Omoerah is coming out, he's giving a speech, or talking to the provincial team, for example, or you're talking to the high school. What advice would you give to those players who actually want to go on and play pro?
Yeah, I mean, the short and long of it would be one, the Kirby Shep, use a game of basketball, don't let it use you. And the other part of it is that, for me, is also kind of the same thing. Don't cheat the game and the game won't cheat you. Kind of like I had said earlier, with football, you could be a great wide receiver, but if you don't have a good quarterback, it doesn't really matter. With basketball, if you're good enough and you work hard enough, you're bound to get noticed, right? As big as this world is, as big as the basketball community is, it's also very small, right? There's somebody that knows someone that knows someone, and so on and so forth. So just kind of staying the course and being true to yourself, I think is going to take you as far as you want to. Everybody's course and timeline and storyline is different. For me, going through that time period of the, when I couldn't go to Western Europe, and I was like, why me? Like, I could have sat there and sulked for as long as I wanted to, but it was just part of my journey and part of my story. And I look back at it now, and I would have loved to have been in certain situations, but also I would have never gone to Eastern Europe. I would have never gone to the Middle East. So it's all a blessing. Take it as a blessing, work hard, kind of stay the course.
Yeah. Well said, man. I really enjoyed this, Keith. I mean, like, again, there's so much that I didn't know. Like I said, what the story in my mind of you is: Grant Park, good player, played at U of M, took some years off, played against me. I know you play for Nigeria, you're on that U of M team, but like all these fine details. And I think this is, basketball has taken both of us in all over the world, literally. But it's like being able to like sit and talk with people like yourselves and like hear your stories and have you share those is for me, it just means so much, man. So I really appreciate this time. And I know that people listening are have enjoyed our conversation. So
I appreciate you having me. It's funny too, from my end, like, you don't relive or revisit these stories all the time too. So me talking about them, it's bringing up these kind of like euphoric feelings for me too. So I'm glad I gotta kind of be here and share this with you.
You can feel it. I can feel it, man. I can feel your energy. That's why I was like, geez, I'm like, this guy's making me emotional. Like I wasn't there. What's going on here? But it's like when you're a basketball player, and I think we probably have more in common than just basketball, but definitely have the basketball thing in common. Like there's so much relatable moments, and when you're describing stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, I get that, I get it, And so, it was really good, and I appreciate you, man. I think we'll say goodbye there.
All right. Well, hold on. One thing.
What do you got?
I just want to say, Darcy, he hasn't kind of alluded to the fact that Darcy's part of my story as well. There was a time I really couldn't shoot, and me and Darcy got together, and Darcy, shout out to you, because we spent hours in that CMU gym.
I forgot about that, man. I forgot about that.
Oh man, my wrist still hurts
because I was scared.
Oh my goodness.
Was I making you do this thing too?
Yeah,
like get the wrist back.
I remember my shot was like this. I'd always hold my finger. And you said every court I go to when I play this summer, when I shoot, I have to say spread. Every single court.
Just to get the snap. All summer long. Man, I forgot about that. Like, geez, man. That's
hours in that CMU gym together.
That's true. Man, honestly, I would be a terrible guest because people like remind me about these type of stuff all the time. I'm like, I forgot about that. And so I probably wouldn't even remember half these things. So I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. Like I said, I've been a fan since the first game I saw you, man. I remember it very, very vividly. That's, again, I don't have a good memory, but I remember that very, very specifically. So this is a nice full circle moment then.
I really appreciate it.
All right, brother. Okay, you take care.
Oh, man.
All right, peace.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please like, subscribe, follow, and share this series, and reach out to us with your comments on the show. Thanks again for joining us.